Morning, everybody. Thank you very much for showing up at this early hour of the day. My name is Tom Carlberg. I think Eric made that pretty clear. I'm going to give you a quick overview of the range, distribution, habitat, and the appearance of a lot of the lichens which have just recently been added to the CNPS inventory of rare plants. In fact, we're going to cover all of them. So there's 14 of them, and this is going to be a very brief overview, and we're going to move pretty quickly because we don't have a lot of time. Very quick breakdown of rare lichens by habitat. They are by far strongly weighted towards coastal species and hypercoastal species. Hypercoastal is a word that a lot of vascular plant botanists, well, lichen people go, oh yeah, hypercoastal, right on the immediate strip. Vascular plant people don't use this word quite so much. Coastal means a little further away. And then of course there's two montane species, and then an odd species that I suspect it's because of lack of information. It has a southern coastal presence, but then it also shows up in the Mojave Desert and Pinnacles National Monument. So, on to the species. Bryoria pseudocapillaris is a hypercoastal species. It likes maritime dune forests within sight or sound of the ocean. It's a difficult species to identify, particularly for novices. People who are more experienced can narrow things down quite a bit, but the genus as a whole gets reliable identifications because of microchemical spot tests. Range and distribution for Bryoria pseudocapillaris in California starts at Morro Bay, and it's sporadically on the coast until you get up to Humboldt County and the Samoa Peninsula, which encloses Humboldt Bay, which is where the largest populations of this lichen in the world take place. The cluster of dots up by Crescent City at the extreme northwest of the state is the Tolowa Dunes State Park, which is also a coastal dune forest. In fact, the photograph is from Tolowa Dunes. Bryoria pseudocapillaris also shows up outside of California, all the way up to Puget Sound in Washington state. Bryoria spiralifera, very similar to Bryoria pseudocapillaris. In fact, they were synonymized about a month and a half ago. So the Conservation Committee has their work cut out for them, fixing the paperwork, changing the distribution maps, et cetera, et cetera. This lichen has a very characteristic whitish linear marking on the branches that spirals around the branch. Distribution is virtually identical to Bryoria pseudocapillaris because they share the same habitat, and people have gone to the same places and found both of them, but the abundance is much less. Also appears outside of California, going up to Coos Bay in Oregon. Here's the synonymy. I'm not going to talk about this very much. Everybody here who is experienced with Jepson 1 and Jepson 2 knows about this kind of stuff. And this is why the Conservation Committee of the Lichen Society has some work to do. Calicium adspersum. This is a pin lichen, and we know very, very little about it, probably because of the size. Check out the photograph, look at the scale bar, get out your field notebooks now and find out what a millimeter is, and you'll see why we don't know anything about this. Here's the California distribution of this species. There's one occurrence in Redwood National Park up by Crescent City in Del Norte County. However, it also shows up in Oregon, British Columbia, and it's in Europe as well. So it's broadly distributed in the global sense. However, in California, we're not looking for these things very much. Cladonia firma. Well, in my opinion, most species of Cladonia are difficult to identify, again, requiring spot tests. And in this lichen's case, it might be the reason for its limited distribution. But I'm not so sure about that because Morro Bay has a lot of special stuff going on, as you'll see for a couple of other species that we're coming to. Cladonia firma has a broader global distribution, shows up in Spain, Portugal, the British Channel Islands, and the Canary Islands. Graphis saxorum. I don't know too much about this one. It's an extreme southern species in Baja California, which, as Eric pointed out, it's not where I spend most of my time. It's a long, long drive for me. A small species, the spherical areas that you see in the photograph are somewhere between 2 and 5 millimeters across, grows on rocks, which hence the specific epithet saxorum. And it's, is this Santa Catalina Island?
Yep.
Thank you. So there's your distribution within the United States. However, it also shows up in Baja California del Norte, and it is suspected to be a regional endemic. If you erase the political boundaries between Los Angeles and Cabo San Lucas, it's all the same habitat, right? Well, not anymore. Hypogymnia schizidiata, I love that name. This is actually a very easy lichen to identify. If you can identify the genus, you would recognize this species without any difficulty. It would be easy to train any vascular plant botanist to identify this one. They probably won't run across it because it has this restricted distribution within the U.S. Those are the Channel Islands off the coast of Santa Barbara. It shows up in Baja California, but these are the two areas, and it likes islands off the west coast of North America. So the location in Baja California is very similar in geography to the one on the map here. Mobergia calculiformis, another one that I've never seen. I would love to. This is beautiful. Nice photograph by Frank Bungartz, who was a grad student at Arizona State University for a while. Distribution, again, extremely limited in the U.S. Again, shows up in Baja, another regional endemic to that part of the world, but outside of North America, doesn't seem to exist. There's a very basic problem with saying things like, well, this lichen shows up here or there or in this habitat. The vascular plant flora of California is pretty well known. There's still a lot of new discoveries to be made, but there's probably, I don't know, are there 7,000 talented botanists in California? And I'm including talented amateurs too. People who know like 100 species or 200 species. For lichens, there's probably 30 who can identify 30 species, and probably 4 who are really, really highly skilled, maybe 7. So saying that something shows up only here, we're speaking from ignorance a lot of the time, but we're using the best available information. Onward, Peltigera gowardii. This lichen is unmistakable. Anybody can identify it. And anybody in this room who's connected with the Forest Service, particularly in the Sierra, probably has found this lichen. The habitat is very distinctive also. It likes cold mountain streams above 3,000 feet, preferably a spring-fed stream, very clean water. It does not like streams that are moving so slowly as to accumulate sediment. It also doesn't like streams that are moving so quickly that they start to scour. On the map here, the dark gray forests are forests that have at least one occurrence of Peltigera gowardii, and the light gray ones are identified as having potential habitat for this lichen based on a CNPS report in 2010 by Eric Peterson. This one has a long nomenclatural history, which I'm not going to go into. Every time I tried to incorporate this into my talk, I ran over 20 minutes. Suffice to say, it's gone through a lot of name changes, a lot of species splits based on geography, and most recently it's been split out based on molecular work with no morphological correlation. So God knows what we're going to do with that one. Ramalina thrausta, one of my favorites, very inconspicuous. However, I've trained probably 4 or 5 savvy vascular plant botanists to identify this. Within a day, they are finding it on their own. It's very distinctive because of the little ball-shaped tips at the ends of the branches that form a little hook. You can see them, subtly, but obviously in the photo. Distribution for this one, Del Norte County, the river bottoms of the Smith River and its major tributaries. You can find it, it seems to be kind of, ephemeral. I've actually done some casual monitoring on this. It disappears, and then you find another one 500 feet down the road. The puzzle is this disjunct in Sonoma County by Fort Ross. That's why it has a question mark for the state rank, because we're not sure what the presence in the state really is. And we'd like to get some money, do some habitat modeling and some focused surveys for this species. Solorina spongiosa, which Steve mentioned briefly, another interesting lichen, easy to identify, very distinctive habitat. It's a glacial relict. It likes these sky island kind of habitats. So you'll find it above, 5,000 to 6,000 feet and up. It likes calcareous substrates, limestone, and it likes it seepy, kind of soggy and wet all the time. It's not a forest species, and the distribution is widespread, scattered. It's in those mountaintops. And it's not limited to California either. It shows up in northern areas in the Western Hemisphere. However, excuse me, in the 10 years between 95 and 2015, we've gone from 1 occurrence in California to 7 for this very distinctive lichen. So this one's probably pretty rare, easy to identify and not found very much. Sulcaria isidiifera, poster child for lichen narrow endemism. Lichens don't tend to be narrowly endemic, but this one is definitely that way. Very distinctive again. It's a hairy type of lichen. It likes the coastal chaparral. The identifying characteristic for this one is that the branches split open, and then within the split, these little finger-like projections develop. It's seriously unmistakable. 5 minutes with the hand lens, and everybody in this room would have it nailed, which is why it seems to be truly a rare species. This is the distribution, and it has not changed in 28 years. It's never been found outside of the Morro Bay area. Sorry, that was also the global distribution. Texosporium sancti Jacobi. This is the odd one that shows up on the coast and also shows up in desert areas. I suspect that it's underreported, and that as we flesh in the dots on the map, it'll probably, we'll have a better idea what the habitat really is for this. I think it's probably widespread. Thamnolia vermicularis, which Steve mentioned. I won't spend too much time on that. An Arctic alpine species in coastal Marin County. And again, the distribution has not changed in 16 years. It's an unmistakable lichen yet again, so if there were more of it, I think we would have more than 1 dot on the map. Especially given the fact that Judy and Robertson and Ron Robertson spent a lot of time lichenizing Marin County. So the flora there is actually pretty well known. And then Usnea longissima, the charismatic macrolichen. Long political history here, I won't go into that at all. I will only say that the S-shaped curve of detections levels off not because we've found all of it in the state, but because a commercial lumber company beginning in 2003 was no longer required to survey for it because of a change in its rank. And that's it. Thank you all.